Okay, well, welcome everyone to episode number 10 of our Flatten the Curve video blog. I am Daniel Fung from MoveUp's Communications Department, and yes, it's true, we have officially reached double digits in our episode count. So for this milestone episode, it's fitting for us to have a very special guest, and it's none other than Mike Schilling, President and CEO of Community Savings Credit Union. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Daniel. It's always great to catch up, and I've been following the series. A few of my friends have been on, and you've covered a lot of ground in a short time. It's been really interesting.
Well, that's awesome to hear, actually. Now, for me, it's always a pleasure to be able to chat with you. Our last formal interview was around the time that this book came out. It's On the Line by Rod Mickelberg. And of course, Community Savings played such a major sponsorship role, not only to help get the book published, but worked so that the proceeds from the sales would ensure that the copies of the book would be made available at libraries across high schools in the province. It's an absolutely wonderful read, just in general, but especially more so if you're someone who is interested in the history of working people in this province. But the reason I want to bring up the book is because it's just one of the examples of community savings demonstrating their support for the labor movement. And there are so many other examples that I'm sure we're going to touch on in the course of our chat. But this leads me into the 701 movement, which is the latest campaign that community savings is running. So tell us a little bit about what this campaign is all about and what was the motivation behind starting it.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. And really, it's interesting that you mentioned the book there because, a great project talking about the long and interesting history of the labour movement. But we're all aware that we're living history right now. So the labour story and the struggle for rights of working people is not a story that's finished. It's a story that's very much alive and kicking. And what we're going through now and the 701 movement is a great example about that. And let me try to tell you a little bit about where that came from. So we all saw at 7 o'clock, millions of British Columbians went out at 7 o'clock and we clapped and we cheered for those critical healthcare workers who were really there for us, putting themselves in harm's way, frankly, for the most vulnerable in our society and for all of us who needed it. And there was this, spontaneous. No one organised this really. No one told everyone to do this. This was families really feeling the appreciation and wanting to sort of show that appreciation at 7 o'clock. And it was great. All my kids loved it. All my friends were out there doing it. It really was something special. But what we wanted to make sure was that at 7:01, when the clapping and the cheering ends, that we don't all just go back and forget these workers, forget these people, forget the change that we've seen in our society due to this pandemic. It's really important, and I think everyone realizes this. I'm not trying to lecture people. It's really important that we actually make some changes. And what 701 is about is to make sure that the lowest paid of our healthcare workers, and some of these had to work 2 jobs because one job wasn't good enough on the pay and benefits they received. Some of them working, for instance, in housekeeping, cleaning in hospitals and in food preparation, have been contracted out and are actually getting paid less now in real terms, in actual terms, than they got paid during the SARS pandemic way back when. So we're not looking after these critical workers as well as we should do, and I think British Columbians realise that. So we did a bit of research. We did some research with Angus Reid. One of these, we asked 1,000 British Columbians. And we got an overwhelming response that, one, we saw that millions of British Columbians were out there clapping. 2, we saw that British Columbians saw people who work in long-term care and people who work in cleaning in hospitals and these other jobs, other than doctors and nurses, of course, were absolutely critical. We all realised we need these people. And we saw massive public support that these people should be paid a fair wage and should be respected in that way. And that hasn't always been the case. There's actually, and there's a lot of details on this, and there's people who can speak about this better than I am, but there's pandemic pay, and there's been a levelling up of pay in certain areas. And I think both at a federal level and certainly at a provincial level, a lot of work has been done to support these workers. However, what we're saying is that can't go away when they get us through this pandemic. They were there for us when we needed them. If we want to say thank you, we need to have longer memories than that and continue to respect and support these workers through the pandemic. So that's what the 701 movement's about. There's a website, if I can do a quick plug, it's www.701movement.org. please get on there and sign the petition. We're challenging everyone who clapped just to do a little bit more. Get on there, write your name down, and show support for fair pay and benefit for all of these workers. We think this is going to get great support. We know we've got support within the provincial government for this. We know we've got support, obviously, within the Labour movement, and we've seen through our research that we've got massive support amongst British Columbians who are pretty generous and fair people.
And I think you touched on such a great point because you're right. When we think of healthcare workers, our minds automatically think doctors and nurses, but we forget that there is a lot more to healthcare than just doctors and nurses. And there is all those support staff, including janitor services or food services. And sometimes, or I think traditionally, those roles have been some of the more low paid in our society. So I have to say, by the way, I absolutely love the name of the campaign. You're right. It's just so fitting. I think so many of us can remember back to those early days when we were first locked down because of the pandemic, and we saw just this wonderful organic groundswell of public displays of support for our healthcare workers. And you're also right. As time goes on, it stops becoming top of mind for people, and then they forget and they move on. But just because people's attentions have moved away, it doesn't mean that that work, that sacrifice, isn't still happening. You touched on this as well with some of the temporary pay. We saw a lot of big grocery chains institute their hero pay when all this started, but then just right away cut it off and said, well, that's it. I want to know what you made of that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the 701 movement really serves as a metaphor for a wider societal change that we need to see. So the 701 movement, we focused on healthcare there for obvious reasons. But, we also work very closely with UFC W1518, for instance, who support a lot of the people who work in grocery stores. And, again, yeah, absolutely. These people showed up day in, day out. They kept these stores open. They did that very. You go back to early mid-March. None of us really knew how this was going to go, and we sit here now. I think we're very fortunate because British Columbia has led the world in terms of its response to this healthcare crisis, and I think we've worked together at a political level, amongst businesses, amongst workers, amongst us all. We've really rallied together, and we've led the world in terms of our response to this healthcare crisis. But now what we need to do is sort of lead the response to the societal change that we want to see. And really, it's so important that we remember it's so tempting. We all want to go back and enjoy our summer. We all want to go on holiday. We've all had a rough time this year to varying degrees, but we do need to remember those people who were there for us when we needed it. And I want to give a bit of a shout out to the team at Community Savings as well, because we're one of the only financial institutions that kept every branch open every day. And that wasn't because of anything I did or my leadership team did. That was because our members worked with us to not come in the branch unless it was necessary. So a big thank you to our members. But our branch team turned up every day. And they did that during times of uncertainty. We worked very hard to keep them safe. But frankly, they showed up when we needed them to serve our members and make sure people had access, because actually access to your money and access to banking for vulnerable people is very important. So whether it's people who are working in our branches, whether it's people who are working in the grocery stores or in the hospitals, these people showed up for us, and it's time for us to show them some respect. And that's what the 701 movement is all about.
And I know, what, it's one thing to tell people how much you care. It's really quite another thing to actually show that you do, and in a genuine way. And I think that's what people feel when they see the work that organizations like Community Savings does. I always think back to the initiative that Community Savings had around providing paid days off for staff who were experiencing domestic violence. It was just earlier this year that the BC government introduced legislation to provide 5 paid days off as part of our employment standards. But I actually think back to last November, and it was Community Savings reaching out and saying that we, Community Savings, want this for our staff, for Move Up members, and for members of other unions that work at Community Savings. And that's something that I think is definitely pretty rare. While we have time here, I wanted to ask you first, how is everyone doing at Community Savings? I know we've been in kind of the COVID era now for about 4 months. I want to know how our members are doing. But I also know that Community Savings has done some pretty innovative things to try and help out the community, help out local businesses. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of that work.
Yes, certainly. Well, the team are doing great. We're a family at Community Savings, and we all look after each other. And that's the way it's been for a long time. That's why as we're building, I think BC's premier financial institution, it's no surprise that that organisation treats its team like a family, and that goes all around. And I'm a pretty newcomer to the organisation, and I've been welcomed really well. But I know I'm casting my mind back now to March, where we made some decisions about supporting our team and making sure that if they needed to take time off due to COVID-19, if they were advised to self-isolate, for instance, we were going to cover that. We weren't going to ask them to take it out of the 12 days leave that they already have, or the extra leave that they can bank. We were just going to cover that. And I remember actually Graham Hutchinson, one of the directors at Move Up, spoke really passionately, because I think through his work at Move Up, he'd seen employers that were not really there on that, right? Not really making those decisions. For me, it was an easy decision. If someone needs help within our team, we give that help, and we look after them. And that's why our members keep coming back to us, because they get great service, because people are happy to work here, frankly. So the team are great, and I couldn't be any prouder of what they've achieved through that. But also some other decisions we've made. But like I said, all of these are easy decisions. During this crisis, Community Savings realised that this was our time to look at our community and what they needed. It wasn't our time to look at our bottom line and our profits and our accounts. It was our time to pay back the trust that our members have given us over the last 75 years. So again, in mid-March, we went out with an interest-free loan. We're never going to charge any interest on this. It's $2,500 for people who've been laid off very early in this, and they needed to pay rent next week. So we were there. We can do that quicker than the government can get money into people's pockets. We can do it in 24 hours. So we went out and did that. We've also, with a lot of the businesses that bank with us, we've provided $40,000 interest-free CEBA loans, which has really helped businesses. And we want our businesses to be successful, because they're employing the workers in our community. So we were doing that so businesses could bridge the gap, and it's great to see so many of them come back on their feet. But something a bit special, and you'd expect this from Community Savings, is we're the only financial institution in Canada who took that business $40,000 interest-free loan and provided it to labour unions as well. Because as the largest provider of banking services to labour unions, we saw the great work that they were doing in keeping their members safe, in making sure that members had the right pay and benefits and leave and protections. We saw how hard that labour unions were working. We wanted to make sure that short-term financial difficulties wasn't going to stop that work. So we provided that $40,000, that federal scheme. We funded it ourselves. We provided it to labour unions, gave them that lifeline. But really, these are easy decisions. The team has worked terrifically hard, but knowing the right thing to do is not that hard. So yes, so proud of the team. Everyone's happy and healthy. We're all very, very busy, but that's the way we like it.
And I know Community Savings, you call yourself the union's credit union. It's not just a tagline. It's not just a slogan. You mean it, and you live it every day. And that's just fantastic to see. I would be remiss also if I didn't mention all the support over the years that Community Savings has provided for our Bob Derby Memorial Charity Golf Tournament, which raises money for the Union Protein Project. I know you're very familiar with that. It's really unfortunate because of COVID that we're not able to host that event this year, but we are looking forward to seeing Community Savings there again next August when our tournament returns. Aside from the Union Protein Project, are there any other charitable projects that Community Savings is involved in that you want to highlight?
Yeah, it's been a funny year for the golf, hasn't it? Well, I'm not a very good golfer, so I probably needed a year off to practice, so it's not going to do me any harm. But I'm surprised, I've missed sort of catching up with friends across the various golf tournaments, and I'm looking forward to next year. We continue, one of our main thrust of charitable giving is through the Union Protein Project, as you've mentioned. And we've recognised actually that a problem which frankly should never have existed, food banks should not exist in Canada, but a problem has been exacerbated here, with more and more families relying on them, and it becoming more and more difficult, frankly, for food banks to reach families because of some of the physical distancing restrictions that we have, and the impact it's had on volunteers who help food banks. So we're continuing to work with the Union Protein Project to see what we can do to help that. But what's been really interesting to me, as important as our philanthropy is and our charitable giving is, really this has brought home that it's the work that we do as a credit union every day that really has the most impact on people in our community. In making sure that people are treated fairly, that the unions that bank with us are treated fairly, that people have control over their own money, and it's not being sort of taken away by a bank and done something weird with, right? When people bank with us, we invest in our local communities, and when times get tough, we pay back into our local communities. And that's really been the big message for us, and that's the real difference between choosing an organisation like Community Savings Credit Union and another financial institution. So the team have been working super hard on that. We've saved our money up from the golf tournament sponsorship, so we'll be ready to pay double next year and have a really good comeback tournament in August, as you said.
Well, we're really looking forward to having you there next August, and hopefully, we can kind of put COVID behind us by that point. Knocking on wood. I want to put you a little bit on the spot here now, and because you're talking a lot about investing in the community, and this is outside the scope of your work with the credit union. I want to make that clear. We often run into you a lot of times when we're out at different conventions or events, especially over the last year, because MoveUp has been very much involved with our Driving Public campaign, which aims to educate people about the benefits of having a public auto insurer, not only because a well-run public insurer provides better coverage at a better price compared to the for-profit private insurance companies, but also because there is such a significant benefit to the local community. We're talking about jobs that from across the province that just don't exist with private insurers who run their operations from outside of BC and outside of Canada a lot of times, but also the community investments in things like road safety and road improvements, so that that money is not being having to be coming as much from the municipalities, so that it can go towards other services. I know whenever we run into you at those events, you're always very supportive, and I just want to ask you about why you feel strongly about supporting our public auto insurance system.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a great campaign. First of all, I say that it really caught my eye because I think the campaign was fantastic. Not only sort of from a visual impact point of view, but the intelligence of the argument. And it's interesting because there's two sides to this debate, as we all know. And it almost feels a little bit one-sided sometimes watching it, because I think that the amount of research that has gone in to the team. And I don't know exactly who leads this over at MoveUp, but the amount of research that goes into there to refute some of the arguments from the other side is really quite impressive. And this is a complex issue, and I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert. So it is really important to get down to some of those details, to not throw around slogans and headlines, but to have facts to back up things. And I think that's what I see from the campaign. That's what's been really impressive about it. It's also something which impacts us all. My family run a car. We pay insurance. We're interested in how that works, how efficient that is, and where that money's going. And as you said, there's a lot there that perhaps I didn't realise until I learned more about this campaign. So it's another example of how the labour movement can really use its expertise, use the talent within the system to really put forward a coherent argument that's going to impact the lives of British Columbians. This is just one example. As I said, the 701 movement, again, it's another one. The labour movement coming together, because I know we've got support of MoveUp. We've got support of the HEU, we've got support of BCGEU, we've got support of Longshore, we've got support of IBEW 1580, 213, and I'm forgetting lots of other people who are supporting us. If there's one thing that the labour movement has, it's solidarity. It's not about the leadership, it's not even about the marketing, sorry Daniel. It's about the solidarity of our members and the power of what we can do to come together. And I think the campaign, the Driving Public campaign is a great example of that. The 701 movement is an example of that. If we come together and we stand on these principles, we will make the changes that we need to see. And that's a really important lesson. So, all of these things, we work as part of a team, not only in our own organisation, but across the labour movement. And that's what's such fun things about our jobs.
Mike, it's always such a pleasure to chat with you. Again, one more time for everybody. You want to support the campaign, sign the petition on their website. It's www.701movement.org. If you're interested in other services at Community Savings, it's www.comsavings.com. Mike, I know we're going to be talking again with you really soon. Take care, keep safe, and say hi to all of our members who are working so hard at community savings at all the branches that you have across BC and at the head office. You mentioned all the great work that they've been doing and working for people in the community, and we couldn't be prouder to represent them at Move Up, and I know you couldn't be prouder to have them working for you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Daniel. Great to catch up.